Welcome to Art Zone. Art Zone is a video document of art and artists in the Rockford area. In this episode, we'll speak with J.R. Sullivan, director of New American Theater. This is Jim Sullivan's last production at the theater, and we spent some time reflecting on his past and discussing his plans for the future.
This is the Art Zone. 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 Hi, I'm Doc Slavkowski, and this is the Art Zone. We're coming to you from J.R. Kortman Center for Design downtown in the heart of Rockford's Cultural District. And we're just across the way from New American Theater. From its humble beginnings to becoming a major cultural force in the city, New American Theater has been under the guidance and leadership of J.R. Sullivan. In the beginning of 1994, Jim Sullivan announced that he would be leaving the theater. He is one of Rockford's most recognized and respected leaders in the arts community. He's been highly visible, seen on the stage and television and the newspapers and on the cover of Rockford magazine, and has been the recipient of the Mayor's Arts Award. Here now is a close-up interview with J.R. Sullivan, the man and his theater. We're talking with J.R. Sullivan on the set of Dancing at Lughnasa. Is that right?
That's Dancing at Lughnasa.
Dancing at Lughnasa. And we're at New American Theater. This is kind of your swan song.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm that beautiful as a swan, but and I don't know how good my voice is, but I suppose it is, because it's the last show that I'm as the producing director, artistic director, managing director. I've had a lot of titles over the years. It's the last one that I have a direct hand in artistically, and because it is an arts endeavor, you know, art and expression and imagination is the heart and soul of the place. So this is the last of heart and soul for me.
We have to go back, because I think everybody's, and some people probably know the story, but I'm sure I'm curious to just hear it from you again, how the whole thing started, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about that too.
Well, the whole thing really started when I was in high school, and just out of high school, in my relationship with the Powers family. I was very close to especially Charlotte Powers. She was killed in a car crash in 1969 on her way to a show that we were all working on together at Boylan. And that tragedy brought together a group of people, late 60s, an activist time, an optimistic, idealistic time, a time that held in the palm of its hand, I think, if it wasn't in a fist in the air, that you could make a change, that an individual could make a change for a better life in a society, so that everything we did had a social dimension to it. It wasn't just some sort of self-serving gratification thing. That tragedy coalesced a group of people around that rock-hard faith. So I stayed close to that by going to Beloit College and studying theater as well as English there. Had wonderful teachers there. And just as I was graduating in 1972, Stephen Powers, Charlotte's brother, came up and said that he was going to follow up on his old Orpheus Coffee House idea, a place that he ran on West State Street when that was still a block of storefronts there, not the First of America Bank Plaza, that he was going to open a coffee house called Charlotte's Web, and he had a whole synagogue to do it in, because Bill and Karen Howard were going to get the building and provide to be the angels for the project. And they only wanted to use the basement level of it, which was right off the street. And did I want to do a theater upstairs? We'd have like our own performing arts center to do an alternative kind of work, because back then the New American Theater was alternative theater. It wasn't the mainstream theater that it's perceived to be today. Well, there I was in Beloit with my English major and my theater major. Didn't know what I was going to do. I guess I had a notion that I would go to New York and see if I could eke out a life there. But there I was also with that faith in community, and especially the group of people that loved each other the way we did. So of course I said yes. You know, I had just done an internship with Milwaukee Rep and had worked in every area of the theater, like the office and the scene shop and the costume shop. I mean, I sewed costumes, I made props, I typed subscription renewals, I did everything. You know, as if some higher power had arranged for me to have experience in all those areas other than just acting and directing in plays, which is what you did in school. So I began to set it up. I think at the time I thought it'd be about 2 years and get it going, and then I would push on. And it was 2 years there, but we outgrew the space, and to the extent that we ran the risk of losing our closeness to each other because we were in each other's way all the time. The coffee house had needs, and the theater had needs, and all the rest. But there's a lot of great stories about that. I mean, I remember Steve Goodman, for instance. I was rehearsing one of my one-man show I did called Ben Heck, Child of the Century, and I was rehearsing it. I was aware of somebody watching it in the theater. It was just myself and the lighting guy. And I went down into the dressing room, take my makeup off, and then Steve Goodman comes around the corner. He was like big. He was the headline act at the Charlotte's Web, City of New Orleans.
Right.
And he said, "Hey man, you talked about my great uncle in that show. It was great." You know, and I thought, man, that was such a verification that you were reaching out beyond just the narrow confines of people who liked theater people, as they like to call them, or something. Or Leon Redbone, or all those people. But you know, the music you could hear, you know, during the plays, and the stomping around on stage you could hear during the music.
I remember.
Yeah,
going to the show.
so we were going to not be friends if we kept this up, and we were already losing money. You know, already losing money. The one consistent thing all these years. So we decided that we would form a not-for-profit board of directors so we could raise money and move on, and we did.
Well, I think Jim was really the groundbreaking of the way the arts have had a surge over this past 20 years, and it's only been through the dint of his hard work and perseverance that we have such a flourishing art scene now. I mean, New American Theater has made a big difference in this town, and Jim is really solely responsible for that. I mean, sure, he started up above the web, and we all helped him in those first couple of years, but it's been Jim Sullivan himself that's done it. He's brought professional theater to this town, which we've never really had before. He's done a ton of outreach into the community as far as, you know, the classes and going into the schools. I mean, I think he's really, he's our cultural icon. And we're going to be really sorry to see him go, but everybody wishes him, you know, nothing but the best.
We never had corporate support until the place got going a little bit. The first time we tapped into corporate support was when we got small amounts of corporate support from our board of directors itself, from their companies. And then as things expanded and the theater got more popular, we did a year, 74, 75, at the Women's Club space, another year that was very difficult for us financially because of the high cost of producing there. And then had a short hiatus of a couple of months in the fall of 75 before reopening in the old Limestones, in that storefront place where we were from late 1975 until late 1985, exactly 10 years. And it was there that we turned it around. But corporate support really didn't come to New American Theater until a certain level of audience popularity happened. And that happened about 1976, 77, 78, especially in 78 when we did Equus, that play that actually had nudity in it, and a strongly and powerful dramatic play. I mean, when I think of the years that were the most satisfying in a complete way, it seemed to me I was happiest back then in 77, 78, 79.
Well, that really also had the feel of almost like a Greenwich Village theater. Yeah. It had that kind of...
It was, for those that had the good fortune not to have sat in it, at least in terms of its comforts. It was at the old Triad toy store. It wasn't a theater at all. It was a building with an 11.5-foot ceiling, you know, so that the lights were like right there. And if you had like stairs, you couldn't do that really. You'd have to figure out ways to make it seem as though there were stairs there. A pole right in the dead center of the stage, you know. So if you had usually what were considered the good seats down center, you spent your whole time, you know, going like this. Nobody ever fell asleep at that theater because they're always moving, you know, so they could see it. And the roof, the city owned the building. The rent was $65 a month, and it was that the day we left. It was the day we went in 1975, $65 a month for the building. The day we left, it was $65 a month for the building.
Really?
But that's because everything was boarded up here downtown, and we were going to inhabit the space. We were going to do something with it, bring some people downtown. Roof leaked. We used to catch water in a series of buckets and try to dump them out into the street in the rainy seasons while audiences were in there watching plays. Catch it, on the floor above them before it got to them. That was the theater where you had to go around the block if you had to enter from stage left, because the dressing rooms and the shop and the whole backstage, there was no backstage, so stage right was stage right. But if you had to come in from stage left, you had to actually go out the back door on Wyman Street, walk around the block, rain or shine, winter or summer, and then come in the other way. And you could be in the clothes of Joseph II's court in Austria in 1787 for Amadeus, or you could be like the guys in Of Mice and Men with their double-barreled shotguns and dress rehearsal when they were walking around the street and some guy was ripping off fur coats in the old Edith Parish Furry or across the street where Soda Bar is now. And those guys, instead of making their entrance, I'm in the theater wondering, where the hell are these guys? They screwed up the play. These guys with their prop guns walked across the street and made a citizen's arrest because the guy turned around with 2 fur coats over each arm and he saw, like the Gunsmoke posse there,
That's
and they were just, prop guns. So.
What about the naysayers? I mean, what were they saying? Were people discouraging to you at that time?
Oh, yeah, they have never gone away. I think anytime, well, artists especially are up against it in this culture, not just in Rockford, but anywhere. But there was that whole conservative thing about this town that we were out to prove was wrong. Because, we had friends who left here as soon as they could. That's all they talked about. What are you going to do when you leave Rockford? Mm. And we were going to say, no, bullshit. You can do something here, but you have to have the guts to stick it out, and you got to fight. You just always have to fight. And I think that people that don't like me a lot, and there's some.
No.
They don't like, my nettlesome nature sometimes, my stubbornness about it. But that's because there were all these years of just fighting to say, yes, this has value. This is worthwhile. You've got to have acts of the imagination so that a people and a culture, a society, a community can look beyond itself and see what it could be. And we were always up against that. So there were naysayers from the beginning. Right away they said, give them 2 months, give them 4 months, give them 6 months. And we proved that there was a stronger vein of acceptance and reception for works of the imagination.
Well, he's certainly a unique personality, which I would think you would have to be to have created this. I mean, I certainly would not have had that type of wonderfully obsessive energy to build a theater. I mean, it really takes someone who lives, breathes nothing but theater, and he was willing to do that and able to do that. So he's a unique personality. He's got a unique combination of talents. He's not just an actor or a director or the ability to raise money. It's also coupled with that is the ability to look ahead, to have a vision, and see fairly far down the road into the future. And he's got a good analytical mind and a good organizational mind. And so it's not just artistic, but he also has other talents, which I think you have to have, otherwise the theater would have died at a certain point. And I just wanted to, I think, as I understand the dates of this, when it's airing, it's going to be, coincidentally, it's going to be Jim's 75th birthday. So I just wanted to wish Jim happy 75th birthday. Enjoy it, bud. You haven't got many left. That's going to be your best year.
You did some amazing things in that space. I mean, didn't you do, I think, Death Trap in there?
Death Trap.
I mean, some...
Candide.
Yeah. And what was the show? It's based on Shakespeare as a musical.
Two Gentlemen of Verona.
Yeah, I love that show. I thought that was really
that's
good.
a show where I actually had a guy come up out of the floor within the seating section.
Oh, yes.
This whole, people are watching the play, and all of a sudden, right at their feet, if they were in those seats, this thing opened, and this guy with a fake white dove on his shoulder, Eglamour, the lover of Sylvia's dreams, the dream lover, kind of came up through the floor singing, and it was just like, it was always in your face at that place, the theater, which theater should be, theater needs to get into people's face. It's not TV, you can smell the sweat, you can see the perspiration, you can feel the tension. I mean, it's not like TV. It needs and acknowledges presence and witness of audience.
Because the audience is also, well, that's the other thing, though, I wanted to say about this theater. It's kind of neat is that where you sit, you always have also a view of the audience, because they are part of it. I mean, because too.
That's critical. That's important. That was planned for.
Or you could see a show, for instance, a certain night with a great audience, and the exact same show, and people here are probably doing just as great a job as they were the night, but something maybe didn't happen with the audience.
Different energy going on, different dynamic.
Yeah.
That's the thing about the theater. It's never the same, even the same show.
What about the most successful artistically? I know you probably have a lot of them, but is there one show that like stands out in your mind as like it was kind of like your motherlode of artistic endeavor? Like this is the one where
Well, it's hard, with so many years. It is hard to do that. But there are some shows that do stick out. In fact, this is one of them. Dancing at Lughnasa is one of them. I mean, I'm so glad that it all, at least as an artist, for me, all came together with this one as it is the last one. This is one of my favorites. Our Town in 1990 touched on something spiritual for me and a lot of our audience, I think, from what they said and how they responded to it. But my favorites are going to tend to go toward poetic kinds of plays where image figure prominently, not just narrative. I think I like entertainment, and you have to entertain with whatever you do, whether it's dramatic or comic. But some of my favorites have tended to be to those more lyrical, poetic kinds of works that use language and symbol to create multi-layered moments for audiences. So I mean, a good play isn't about one thing; it's about a lot of things at once, and you don't have to get everything, to be absorbed by it. That's why a great play you can see again and again, because there's always something new to it. It's like if you do see a great painting in a museum, if you look at one of Rembrandt's studies, you don't look at it just once. You come back to it again and again, seeing new things in it because you've changed. You even changed just by looking at it. And I think that's the kind of theater that's meant the most to me. So Our Town had that, for me, with the company mix that we had of pros and local people. And it really felt like this town, when we did that play, and the best of this town.
Jim and I, we go way back. I think he was in the very first show I ever saw. And I also saw the first show he directed, which was Damn Yankees. And I worked with the theater for about 20 years now, off and on. And Jim, it's really, I don't think either of us could really explain our relationship to each other, but he came the closest. Last fall, he wrote me a note. He said that I was like his sister. And I think that really sums up the most, that it's a sister-brother kind of thing. We know what we don't like about each other, but we would do anything to defend each other to someone else.
How about, I know this is, people always like to hear about it, bloopers, just in the course of the years.
I think the most famous one at the old place was, in fact, it happened to me personally, because we were doing an Alan Ayckbourn play called Absurd Persons Singular. And it was a play that took place on 3 different Christmas Eves in 3 different kitchens. And each of the kitchens more or less represented a certain level of the British class system. In the first act you had a rising middle class kitchen. In the second act you had a trendy yuppie couple type kitchen. And in the last act you had a upper class on the slide and downward slide kitchen. And so the play worked on those kinds of levels. I was in the yuppie kitchen. That was my particular house on Christmas Eve. We had all 3 kitchens on the set. We changed it at intermission in that little tiny space, that little tiny theater. And at the end of Act 2, after a big sight gag, we dumped a blackout, immediate blackout. Now, when a blackout happens immediately, you can't see anything, especially if you're the actor and the lights are in your eyes all the time. So you trust people. And my job was to turn and put my hand on the handle of the door that led us out of the set to backstage. And they all grabbed onto my hand or shirt, one, and then piggyback style, like a train, right down to the caboose, all 6 actors, which included Rhonda Ginny McDonald and Linda Obronsky. We all went off stage. One night, lights go to black. Can't see, of course. Reach for the handle. They grab on. They start pushing off stage because the terror, if you're an actor, is the lights are going to come up and I'm still on stage and I'm not supposed to be. Get off stage, get off stage, get off stage. Except that I didn't have the handle to the door. I had the handle to the refrigerator, which was right next to the door. So that refrigerator goes open. The light in the refrigerator doesn't go on because it's on the circuit with all the stage lights. But I know right away it's the wrong door, but it's too late because the audience, they're loving the show, they're applauding, they're laughing. The actors behind me are pushing, get off stage, and they can't hear me. They can't hear me saying, no, it's the wrong door, and they're pushing me into the refrigerator, so I can't take us in the other direction. So when the lights came up for intermission, the applause suddenly stopped because the audience saw 6 professional actors trying to climb into a refrigerator on stage.
Yeah.
And then we sort of sheepishly and quickly got off stage as quickly as we could. It was a classic.
How about, the audience reactions to, things that happen? Are there things that, let's say, that's kind of at least comical.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what about...
Like tragedies.
Yeah, if there's something tragic happened on stage or someone has really messed up their lines?
Well, one tragedy was a play that I wrote, but that was the tragedy. A play called Firehouse Rights in 1978, which wasn't a good play. I wanted to be a writer, and darn it, I was going to be a writer no matter what. And then I was too stubborn to realize that my schedule didn't permit time to do it well. I was going to do it anyway, schedule opening night and everything. I just didn't have it quite done, so it wasn't good. So opening night was interminable and terrible, a tragic thing.
Were you in the show?
I spent the whole 3rd act that night just sitting upstairs, not even watching.
You didn't go out to the lobby?
No, I was too shamed. I was shamed to death. I sat upstairs in a corner of that rehearsal hall with all the lights off, my knees sort of pulled up to my chest, just contemplating suicide.
Oh.
Well, he's like Walt Disney, to Rockford, I think, because he had a dream and he fulfilled it. So, just giving us this theater, he's Walt Disney.
Oh, exactly, and it's a compliment to you.
But I didn't do it alone, and I also I had teachers, people that inspired me, as I've sought to inspire others. I think that's why we're here, to provide that window to other people, into ourselves, but also the window that looks out onto an expanded world, so that we today I feel we're so apart from each other, that there's this me and you and us and them stuff going on. I spoke earlier today at the Freeport Hunger Connection, and I read things from like Grapes of Wrath, as well as Oliver Twist and Child of the Dark, that diary from the 50s from Sao Paulo, Brazil, and all of it was about how there is no such thing as you and them, like people are doing now. So the whole thing had to do with breaking down those walls and reaching out to people and saying that art simply, in theater art or any art, simply exemplifies this idea of the human being and human expression being universal. And that difference and cultural difference is to be exalted, not suspected, and that together we rise.
Is this when we look at the theater now today, 22 years later from the time when let's say, curtain went up first night?
Never had only 1 year do we have a curtain.
That's right. It's true. The lights came up.
The lights came up, yeah. That's still the phrase, though. Curtain up is the phrase. What time is curtain?
Did you imagine this? Did you think that someday it would all come to this? Or is this what you envisioned?
Yes.
So it is that?
Yes. You can't do it unless you believe that it will be that people who say it can't are wrong, that they just don't get it or don't know and they need some help, and you have to believe that it can be what you think it can be. When you begin to lose faith in that, then it won't be. You have to be able to envision it as this. I never doubted that the New American Theater could be a first-class professional operation in Rockford, Illinois. Not once.
All right, what about New American Theater without J.R. Sullivan?
Well, I think it's roughly akin to a child that grows up and leaves the house and becomes itself. I mean, you have to let that process happen. I think that the New American Theater will be redefined now and become its next version of itself. I think that I have done what I set out to do. And it's tough to leave it. It really is hard to leave it because it's not that it's safe and secure. I don't believe that it's safe and secure. If you're thinking that, you're already compromising. It should be risky. It should be edgy. But I could feel in myself an inclination to look at other things and do other things that needed to be done now for me. And they were at odds somewhat with where New American Theater is going. And it's better for me, and it's better for New American Theater, for both of us to move on. It's tough to do, but it's the right thing to do.
Are you scared? I mean,
Yeah, of course I am. I am petrified. I am exhilarated and petrified. It's like jumping off a cliff with the idea this is either going to be a great flight or a hell of a drop. But the jump is there because I want to find out. I'm going to know. I'm going to find out, what's out there. And I'd like to tell the stories of this particular corner of the world, this northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin part of the world, to the world. I think the same way that Brian Friel tells the story of Ballybeg, a little town, a fictional town based on a real town that's tiny in northwestern Ireland, but it becomes universal. There's some universal reach to some of the stories in my area.
I think Jim has, he's taken a theater, he started it, and he's kept it going for 22 years, which is quite an accomplishment. There's a lot of theaters that aren't lasting that long and that have a lot of turnover and everything. So I think Rockford and New American Theater has been very lucky in that Jim has been with us all this time, and he's led the theater through some really tough times, and he's kept it going, and he's always had a vision, and he's always had a passion for the theater, which I think is good, and good for us and good for New American Theater. I think that's going to be hard to replace, that part of it, only because of the familiarity and just having somebody around for 22 years. There's a nice comfort in that. But I think I think what he's done is something that I'm not sure if everybody realizes how phenomenal it really is.
His soulfulness will be missed. I mean, that's sort of a thing that you don't notice normally. It's not perceived from an audience point of view, but I think it will be missed in intangible ways. People will see a play and sense that there's something different, and it might not be the quality of the work, but there'll be a soulfulness that's missing because of he's very demanding as a director, and he demands things from his actors and his designers and his people in the shop, and people get mad at him all the time because it's not right, or they work very hard on something and it's not quite what he was looking for, and they have to go back and redo it, and they get frustrated, but at the end result they say, oh, I see why, and there's a demanding nature that's going to be missed. And I hope that whoever comes in, or the people that are still around, that were around in all these years, will demand that of themselves. And I think that's the best thing that he'll have left for the people here, is a need for artists to demand of themselves more than their first reaction to something, or their initial choice on something, to dig deeper than that. And I'm going to miss working with him.
Well, when we think of the great eras of culture, certainly Western civilization, we look to the great books, the great sculptures, the great works of art. It's charted by artists. It's not charted by, as much as we need them, by the condition of the roads.
One thing that's interesting about doing a show like this, there's no advertising, so there's no break, there's no way to end this. So I'm going to ask for you to do that for us. Can you do that? Can you give I don't know. Is there anything you want to say? Is there something that you've always wanted to say? This is public access television, so you can say just about anything now. I mean, there's no
Well, I would
sponsors that are
say,
going to pull out.
here I am. I would say to you, don't take art for granted. Don't take this theater for granted. Support it, not just financially, but go out on a limb with yourself. You know, open yourself up to the full experience of it. And I think, too, I mean, one of the nicest things that happened to me in this town over the last 20 years was that when the Rotary Club, whose members are classifications of professions, brought me into their club with the profession of artistic director, a kind of first, you know, because it was always thought of as the domain and province entirely of business and maybe education and politicians, you know, although there are many great politicians. But artists struggle to be heard, and there's a lot of bad art, but there's a lot of good art. And art clears the air so that people can see who they are and where they are in the world and where they might be going. So I would say to this community, don't take any of it for granted. Don't believe it's always going to be there, and keep the air free and clear for free expression.
After 22 years with New American Theater, J.R. Sullivan is moving on. We wish him the best of luck. He will be deeply missed. Thanks for tuning in to another Art Zone.
This is the Art Zone. This is the Art Zone. This is